Pushing buttons. Hey, you are live. We are live. Welcome to Geek Out number 33 of of Ritualist, book one of the Completionist Chronicles. Blah. That is a tongue twister. For those of you new to the Geek Out streams, spoiler warnings ahead. Other than that, welcome to the show, my fellow book dragons. My name is Carl. I am your host, and I have my co-host Peter here today to...
on the other side.
Oh, on the other side. And yeah, Pete, we are officially geeking out over this book. You have been talking about it for a while now, wanting to get into the Completionist Chronicles.
Well,
is it simply because you want to talk about Rexus or just the series as a whole?
I have watched other stories that have had crossover episodes. And there's not been a whole lot of books or universes that do the same thing. This one does it well. And it's not exactly a crossover as much as a first apocalypse and continuation event. But yeah.
That's pretty true to our own world, right? How many ice ages / apocalypse has Earth, quote unquote, gone through? Perhaps this is history. Dakota Krout is just, sent from the future to guide us and prepare us for the promised land of when, don't want to get spoilers in the future books. Never mind. I can't talk about that just yet. So yeah, I want to get into the nitty gritty of all the Easter eggs that pretty much come out and say it, but I noticed... Oh, sorry.
But roll the intro?
But roll the intro.
Sorry, I did some stuff and I brought it in, so here you guys go.
You did put all that time and energy to getting us this epic intro, and we found out how to get it into the live stream. We got to remember to roll the intro.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess a little bit of backstory for it. The Divine Dungeon series, I guess IRL came out first. And this is a great standalone. The Completionist Chronicles is a standalone, but it's not, because it is kind of a continuation, but it's done with such vast time and space in between that it's similar yet not exacting, if that makes sense. Probably confused a lot more people, but
yeah. So
if you've read Divine Dungeon, the end of 4 where Dale ascends the tower and talks to... starts with an A.
I don't remember either.
The
law.
The law, Acme, there we go, talks to Acme. It's pretty much the continuation of playing it out.
Yeah, you get the foreshadowing for this series, right? And at the very end of book 5, everybody goes into Cal's soul space, right? And we get more things set up for this series, right? It kind of... I didn't catch it the first time I read it, but I think it had been a while since I had done the Divine Dungeon. But then enough Easter eggs kind of hit me in the face where I'm like, hold up. Is this real? Is everything just connected? And then you start getting the puns. Then you start getting where the AI starts paying more attention and getting more snarky. And it's as if Cal was talking to Dale all over again, and you're just like, oh my goodness, could this be true? Could this like epic fantasy be connected to this lit RPG world? I like questions have been answered, but now I have more questions, right?
Yeah. Like,
So
where is Evan, the dwarf?
that's true. He kind of disappeared
Yeah,
book
he
four
never
and
came
five.
back for 4 and 5. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
that was a side note question.
So in the very beginning, we have Joe, who is this combat medic.
Or no, that's not the beginning. Or I guess that is the beginning. The prologue.
Is his real name not Joe? I thought
No,
it was
no, no.
Joe.
His name is Joe, but the beginning is we have the
Oh,
oil crisis where
that's
we
right.
have an earthquake at the epicenter, and
Yeah.
he gets fired over some shenanigans, changes his name to Elon, and then starts hearing voices about how this is a core, not a rock or
Yes.
whatever. Sorry.
No, you're right. And we get all the fun little Elon Musk puns and jokes. I have a feeling that Dakota might be a big fan of Mr. Musk. Um, and then going into chapter 1 and 2, we spend time in the real world and the prologues in the real world. And then the rest of it's all in the virtual world. And Joe is a combat medic. He's basically drinking with some buddies, talking about the fact of everybody being dehydrated, so on and so forth. And then he gets shot out of the sky, right? Becomes a
Yeah.
paraplegic,
Or quad.
quadru. Yeah, you're right. Quadplegic. He's completely immobile. Um, Wife leaves him, moves in with mom, lucks out where she wins the lottery, and then a buddy from the army shows up and says, "Hey, I got a job offer for you," kind of, sort of.
Just kidding.
And
It's not a job offer.
Joe's like, "What? You serious?"
I'm so excited. I can't move. Yeah.
Got to get that humor in there. Um, and yeah, so technology is at the point where they have these full immersion rigs, right? Um,
That's one thing I will commend this book for. Like, if you are just getting into lit RPG, it does it beautifully because he's literally explaining MMORPG. He's like massively multiplayer role playing game. And
mhm.
then he's like, oh, yeah, the full dive capsules. And he gives them a look and he's like, deeply immersive virtual reality environment. And he lays it out. And then after they get into the trials, he's like, okay, so tomatoes. Why tomatoes? Well, I'll break it down. And he breaks down like all the stats. Strength is how hard you can throw a tomato, dexterity is how quick you can get to a tomato and chop it without injuring yourself. Wisdom is to know that tomato is a fruit. Or no, intelligence is to know that tomato is a fruit, where wisdom lets you know not to put it in a fruit salad. Uh, the communication stat, brain
He
fart. Anyway, he breaks it down really well for the intro.
he does it extremely well. Joe is not a video gamer, right? But because he has this opportunity, he starts reading up on video games and kind of studying to get ready to go into it. But you're right, it's very noob friendly, um, which not all lit RPGs are. Sometimes they really rely on you knowing the jargon, the lingo, what's going on, what's happening. And the the first book of this series kind of eases us into it, gives us the intro. Yeah, there's a lot of lit RPG mechanics, but it still has like the slice of life as well to the book.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think.
And
Go ahead.
so it's like 3 or 4 days of trials that he goes through. And then he gets his first title for terms and conditions or whatever and actually reading them.
Yeah, who does that? Who actually reads the terms and service Supposedly he was it 2 weeks? I think it was 2 weeks real time, but a month in game time because
Yeah.
the world moves at 2x speed inside there. And out of everyone, he was the first one to actually read the terms and service, so he gets that exclusive title. Um, and he was the first one to actually complete all the trials, and some of them were pretty intense, right?
Well, yeah, and it was like 3 day span worth of time, and so much so that like even though he doesn't have a real body, he passed out taking some of the tests.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of the test is standardized across the board and how much of it is situational to the individual.
And I think it's a bit of both,
Okay,
but
tell me more.
because it talks about like politics and other things, but then it also puts him right back in the scenario right before he died, which was
Yes,
a hey, this is what I do for a living, this is what I'm known for, this is my bread and butter of existence at this point in time.
yes,
And he goes back through it.
yeah,
So it's kind of the whole like forward backwards when we went up against the super wisp lure at the end of 5, and how he's like, "Up, the only way I'll give you anything is if I get all your memories." And we know that Cal has the ability when we deal with the Amazonian who's murking, or sorry, the people, Tom's people who are
mm-hmm,
murking all of the Amazonians, and
mm-hmm,
then he does the whole Wolfman swap. Sorry, book 5
yes,
stuff
yes,
of Divine, and so we know he's able to do the whole. Yeah,
yeah. So the trials are somewhat unique, and that was like another big slam in the face when we get to meet Uncle Tatum, the hidden god,
yeah.
because since he was able to do everything, the god was allowed to make him an offer before anybody else showed up. And yeah, it's so fun to see these characters come back, especially after who knows how long has passed time wise.
Well, and that's one thing that I really enjoy about the Ritualist, because like book 5 of the Divine Dungeon, I was like, what? All, they have tattoos of rituals on their body. We know there's a dungeon under there that's influencing them, that's doing all this crazy stuff. We
Hmm.
have the gravity defying drop lift thingies. We've got
Hmm.
the people with it, and the honor for my life, or my word for my honor for my life thingy. And then it all comes back around to like the master spent a lot of time in their community, and we just kind of like glanced at their community. And
Hmm.
then he's now, we know the hidden god is the master, which we didn't get a whole lot of seeing in the Divine Dungeon. I mean, we did, but it was more of a third party. Oh, he's some evil villain. Wait for his monologue. And then it was just kidding. He's just, this dude who's trying to support equality.
Yeah. There's supposedly a short story out that we've talked about of the master back in the day when he was just the butcher's boy that I would love to eventually read. Um,
Is it not an audible thingy?
I don't think so. I think it was special if you buy the
Okay.
series. But anyway, so another point in this book's favor is so many of the lit RPGs, um, the characters like so overpowered in a way, right? Like they're either just like this amazing fighter or the spell sword could take and do all this damage. And we get a couple chapters in, and his class that he gets offered is essentially the equivalent to a tissue paper cannon, right? Like think mage glass cannon. For our non gamers, like glass cannon meaning it packs a lot of damage, but what happens if you hit glass? It shatters, right? So a tissue paper cannon, stiff wind, and we get to see his character constantly get mistaken for a ghoul or a young lady or something like that because he's just so scrawny. Um, yeah.
But this is very similar to the land, where the land he starts off and it's like, oh, but you have this one awesome power. And for this, he has where he accelerates his knowledge at 4 times
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what another person could do. So it's very much a long game strat. And yeah, he's not overpowered now, and he has a lot of clutch moments. But yeah,
I mean, granted, there is that divine intervention where the god gets involved, and I do typically play a caster or a healer when I roll. Um, but it would be a tough sell for me to play a ritualist from the get go when you're trying to think of like making your way in the world. Um,
especially after becoming a quadriplegic, and now that you've got your
yeah,
limbs back, you're still seriously hindered.
yeah. How about you? What do you
I
typically play, or which way do you think you would be
I
leaning if you were Joe?
try to fill either the tank or the healer role. It all depends on what the party needs. I'm
Yeah,
not a deeps kind of person. I'm not DPS typically.
they're always easy to find, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that's just kind of where that mentality comes from, from vanilla WoW, where,
Hmm.
you type out looking for a group and they're all DPS.
Yeah.
So finding a party. But besides the point, yeah, I don't think it would be very encouraging, especially with all the like real feedback. But there are a couple points in the favor where he typically is very learned. He enjoys books. There's a quote when he volunteered at a library so he could get the first book. So it's not too far from his nature.
Hmm.
And I don't think for me it would really work because like I have some things that I like hyper focus in and that I enjoy, but then everything else is just not interesting enough.
Yeah. What what other Easter eggs kind of jumped out at you in the beginning?
Well, now that we've established this is Cal from Divine 5, the continuation,
Hmm.
in the prologue when he's looking at the, I forget what he calls it initially, and it keeps telling him, hey, it's a core, hey, it's a
Hmm.
core for abyss sake. It's like, okay, so it's definitely a core. And then he's looking at it and sees like the different coloration in it, and it looks almost like chains. So in the storyline, we know that Xenocide's Chains of Chaos that is binding Cal that we've seen Rose use prior essentially states for a indeterminate amount of time they will not be able to move or use their channel their mana more or less. They're still able to cultivate and they're still able to think. Well, good news is we literally have a world inside his soul space, so he can think all he wants on that. Um, so yeah, we know that the chains of chaos are still holding him in place from the prologue. Our first enemy that we go up against are bunnies who
Yes.
jump and bash people with their horns. So, I mean, if you read any of the Divine Dungeon stuff, the bashers.
Yes. He starts off with glorified bunnies, right? Um, so to get that subtle little nod again at the beginning, where they start fighting the different rabbits, is too funny. And then yeah, eventually we get to the Wolfmen, right? And you just talked about that a little bit earlier with the people and everything becoming the Wolfmen.
Or Northmen. That was the other word
The
they used for him.
Northmen. Yes. Yes. Um, yeah.
Which I want to say second book, there's a big revelation there, but I didn't say that. Um,
We haven't gotten to the second book yet. So I'd like to though. I'd certainly like to. Um, yeah.
yeah, that was another good point there, Paul. Yeah. Paul says, I love when he gets jumped and heals himself, sees all the OP gobs. So, in the Divine Dungeon series, Bob um, has his army of goblins,
Mm-hmm.
and he essentially the guild gets ahead in reputation gains. Headshot kills the rest of his party. We get the whole scene where Joe's like, "Yes, I was off heroically slaying rabbits or bunnies or something," and
Yes.
Headshot, pretty much gives him an ultimatum of jumping off the cliff, so he gets a full-time respawn. Anyway, jumps off the end of the world, which is not the end of the world, and goes splat. His robes keep him at 1 health. He heals up and he gets his expert level jump low Coneser unlocked. And then
Yes.
he's walking around and he sees something running in the distance. And they're like, what are they riding to be that fast? And the only little hint we get is when he gets murked in his combat log, it says, like, oh, novice, goblin, berserker, or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so we know Goblin Berserker is totally a thing in Cal, and the fact that it's a novice shows like it's advanced and
Mm-hmm.
there's more of a cast or structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
Or Jumplomancer. Oh, yeah, 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 because he thinks, like Paul, he thinks it should be called Jumplo Kineser, but they're using the more common form, Jumplomancer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so that was another big like nod. And then I think, sorry, jumping forward, connecting dots. When they finally become a noble guild,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, all thanks to Joe, because
Mm-hmm.
Joe's literally carrying them. Uh, there's the conversation with the queen, and she's pretty much like, and this was another big thing for me. She says that the people in this world were fighting each other, which we know. As soon as they got through Kyle Soul Space and 5, they were automatically fighting, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
he divided it up into 7 continents or 7 land masses. And
Mm-hmm.
then he said, or she, the queen says that um, they were put into a stasis or frozen, and then elevated up, rose up the ground, and like separated them again. And now that's their whole quest line. Or well, they've been back for 200 years. As when Joe first gets into the world, the lady's rambling about welcome to the new whatever of Ardania, really or newly reconnected to, yeah. Anyway, for 200 years, and I lost the train of thought. Or essentially that from end of 5 Divine to now, there was a war. Cal put a stop to it, put everybody on ice, and
Mm-hmm.
then he brought them back 200 years ago, and now he's got this pitting races against each other where the humans are going up against the Wolfmen, who used to be a section of the Northmen, and the Queen, yeah, brings all that together.
That interaction there when him and his guild, all the officers go in to see the king and queen, and they're pretty much wearing nothing but um, that armor or whatever. The first time I read it, that was the big Easter egg slash slap in the face. Like, oh hey, is this the king and queen?
Marie
Yeah,
and okay,
Henry,
Henry.
right? Where they go and they make a deal with Cal and become dungeon born themselves and get the mithril armor and everything. That was the big like, oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, because
Like,
they're mages and don't need to use the restroom. Or,
yeah, yeah. Um, and there's plenty of other little subtle nods in there, like magic users and mages aren't like quite the same, but at the same time,
well,
like where their word is law, um, or how it has power, like there's that connection as well.
that's where things got weird for me because the Northmen or the people, that was kind of Tom's persona of, hey, my word for my life. And he
Mm-hmm.
meant it literally, like, we are bound. If I misspeak, I'm going to die.
Right.
But that's the Northmen and the people side of things, as well as a lot of the people who end up in Cal's soul space were mages. But
Mm-hmm.
we get that scene where they're throwing around magic and fighting, and they can't recollect their mana. It used to be that they could cast it, kind of like when Dale's learning how to ground surf or whatnot. He casts it out, he does his
Right.
little surf bit, and then he reabsorbs it.
Right.
Or kind of like how Adam, rest in peace, who does his whole, you know, celestial bubble thing and then absorbs it back.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so they can't do that because as soon as they cast it, Cal's like num 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 num, and he absorbs it all, and so it doesn't get recycled. But the Archmage, the poor man's lawyer or whatever, who we
Yes.
topple at the end of the book, pretty much reinstates that. So in my mind, he used to be a powerful mage, but without being having access to their essence or whatever, and to be able to do binding contracts through their words, he wants to
Mm.
reinstate that or make that a thing. But at the same time, it very much has like a collaboration influence of the Northmen, where that was kind of their thing, where they have a very rigid structure of how everything was set up.
I
But it,
took it as just the fact that like all mages who are B tier or up, as soon as you could use mana and everything as mana, then your word is law,
yeah,
right? So yeah, like the Northmen had that too, but just like anybody who cultivated and got to that level, um, their words,
I guess that makes the sense between signing it and still having a bit of freedom and signing it a double signing.
right, right. Um,
Anyway, we kind of got all over the place.
yes,
I guess first outing, your job is not to die. What all happens in the first outing? Hmm,
that's not when they meet Headshot, is it? Is that
no, that's
that's
the second outing
right? He initially doesn't want to join the guild, and it's
because of
not
his deity and his quest line he's got going on.
right. Eventually, he gets drawn back into it, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, I definitely want to be a part of this." Um, but yeah,
I guess a couple good points. So goblins figured that out, jump off the edge of the world, which isn't the edge of the world, which is really the real world before we got divided and sectioned into there can be only one Highlander style fight scene. Um, it turns out that we're going to go up guild versus guild. The Wanderers, really enjoy the
hmm
name, versus
yes,
Headshot, Scoon, oh, the Hardcores.
yes,
And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be needed. I'm the healer." A bunch of people, and he's like, "La la la. Let me go figure out all my ritual stuff." I wish there was more on that. He does get a little bit of combat with them later when they seek retribution, but he goes off and he talks to Boris, who is the librarian, who is going to set him
he's
up on
fun.
his scholar thing. And essentially, it's like, oh, hey, you're only level 3, so you can't become a scholar because you unlock your profession at 5, but I can start you on the journey, which that's one thing I enjoy a lot about these kind of books. It's not a hard, yay or nay for a lot of things. They have like actual realistic NPCs where they can interact with and unlock additional stuff or
hmm
do things out of order because he like starts on his profession without having it unlocked and everything is held until he's eligible and able to do it. Anyway,
Right.
so we start organizing the first floor of the library, and we're at the point where he's praying for guidance, and his Jumbo Kinesis or Jumbomancer comes into play with his prey because he can apply his jump skill to other aspects and finds a ritual magic for dummies, more or less. And with this, he's able to do the little sister's cleaning service. He first tries it at the odds and ends shop where he gets his robe repaired by.
I forget her name.
Yeah, I just
Pretty
remember
much.
she's a arcane loot lord. I
Yeah.
was like, whoa, that sounds
So,
epic.
right.
Um,
How do I become that again?
oh, there were several steps in between. And
Mm-hmm.
then the sad thing is, like, she used to be an archer, or then a ranger, and then something, and then arcane loot lord, but she can't see like 5 feet in front of her face as of currently. So I guess they have skills that zoom or whatever. And when she pops that zoom times 200, she can see 6 feet in front
uh,
of her face. Anyway,
sure, she's not just giving Joe a hard time. I mean, she did call him a little girl or a young girl, young lady
yeah,
when he came into the store, because he's so small and frail.
yeah. And then they hinted at gnomes, which we didn't see any gnomes in Divine Dungeon, I don't think.
I don't think we did.
But yeah, she's like, oh, he's like, I'm neither young nor a lady. And she's like, oh, sorry, young man. You're so small and frail for a human male. Oh, are you a gnome?
Right.
Anyway, side story. Then we end up having Tiona help us get zombie rabbit brains,
Mm-hmm.
make a big mess all over the table, clean it up so that we don't lose rep with the for our guild. And we use the first ritual at the odds and ends to organize it. Opens up a whole quest line. Stay tuned. Books are more. And then we get to going to Jake, the alchemist, to get other things, and that's just a whole odd
There's just like
experience.
so many fun characters in this, like all in their own way, like including the real life characters. His main party, they're all kind of memorable in their own way. And then just the random people he interacts with. Maybe instead of doing like the MVP for this one, we'll do like who is your favorite NPC that we've made or yeah.
That we've met, and that's what's
Hmm.
another weird thing, because like we say NPC, non-player character, but it's not. It's a IRL slash vortex into the soul space of another being, of which
But
loses us our body and then assimilates us into a new form after being put into stasis and bound chicka bound bound babies 200 plus years later end result. So it's
so
not
many
that they're not people.
what does it mean to be a person? I think in a lot of ways this book kind of makes gives you that question, right? Like, is Joe now considered an NPC? He doesn't have a body anymore.
Yeah, he's
Um,
completely. I think the only reason he's
eh,
not is because he gets the reroll, or he gets the, or not. He can't reroll.
he can't reroll.
He gets the res. Where I'm not saying that the other people don't get a res, because we know there's at least 7 continents or whatever. And, or well, no, that's not true, because that's the original land, and now he's elevated them off of it. Anyway, because like if they've, yeah, I don't know, it's
I,
beautiful description there, I'm
I,
sure,
yeah.
because
Sorry. Go ahead.
they, all the people who, all of his, oh, cultist in Divine Dungeon,
Oh,
he
right.
was pretty much saying, hey, you've devoted yourself to me, you've made a pact, I will revive you.
Mm-hmm.
But the NPCs in the game aren't revived. But I don't know if that's like the whole, oh, I guess, sorry, jumping books again. This is where my brain goes, and join me.
This is why
Um,
you wanted the crossover episodes, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because you're
yeah,
constantly
because
crossing.
if you take the Lord Ruler from Mistborn, who has his nobility, who are the people who helped him during the Ascension.
Hmm.
They are the nobility, and they're essentially put into places of power. Well, that didn't happen, but since the cultists have given themselves to Cal, who have been assimilated into the Ritualist or Dungeon Eternium, what
Hmm.
kind of perks do they get? And as we've seen, the Master was essentially stripped of all his powers because he couldn't fit a level, S rank or double S rank inside his soul space.
I was
So
about to
then he
say he
makes a
was
pact, and now he's nerfed super hard, and he ends up just enjoying his lore, and that's what's make him Uncle Tatum or Tatum at the end of it. And so, yeah.
so many questions because like he was a tier 2 of the spiritual level, right? And now he's a deity god, which for me kind of makes me wonder like what about the other gods in this game? Sorry,
Well,
game. Um,
the Pillow Mage at the end of 5 is pretty much like, hey, I'm not interested in this war. What can I do to start paying back that debt? Because he asked a favor to go save some people, which I haven't read that side story yet, so I can't
I
spoil any
want
of
to
that for you. Um,
sunshine and love.
yeah, Sunshine and Love.
Yeah.
So
Um,
now that we've gotten completely lost, eventually we hit level 5 because we've got an ongoing quest with the guards that says, hey, I'll heal people. Ends up healing the Baron or the Duke or I don't know, blah blah blah, noble. Um,
Son, Prince slash Baron.
or what? I think the Baron dies, the Prince
Yes.
survives. So
Yes.
anyway, we heal the Prince, and the Prince repays him by murking him, and yeah, so that whole combat log is kind of funny. He's healing him. He's got a massive health pool. He hits him, takes out like 50% of his health, and then he hits the wall, and the combat with the wall triggers his undying robes, and then he gets hit again and he dies. Anyway, so that guy shows up, gives him a core, and it's like the biggest core he's seen, and he actually absorbs it, dings his 5, goes back, collects the stuff from the Boris to get his scholar stuff started, uses a
Hmm.
ritual the second time, and he uses a real human brain from Jake the alchemist. Man, I'm on it for names.
You are.
And then that's where he uses the brain. We get the whole like, oops, I shouldn't have done my ritualist in front of him. And he's like, well, how massive is your mana pool?
Right. My
My
day's
day's
been in
been very interesting.
insert some heavy breathing and panting. Um, yeah, that's just too funny.
Oh man, that
Uh,
whole scene where he's like, I know your guild is fighting this other guild. This is a zombie. Zombie brain, are you trying to infect them and, get them hated and make them disband?
yes, yes. Um, as he continues to get excited, and that's just where the audiobook is just incredible because the voice actors like really get into it and just the level of immersion, even at listening at 2.5, 3x speed, it's just incredible.
Yeah,
Uh,
there aren't any sounders, which was a little disappointing. But Dakota picks up the slack where every time they level and there's a soundless explosion, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Um,
yeah,
and then Paul, oh, you already clicked it. Paul saying Joe being an oddball is the best part of this book. Like when his whole guild thinks he's a weirdo. And there are a couple points in the next couple books that kind of emphasize and explain all that. but a lot of it is like his normal mentality and whatnot, and it's yeah, it's more stat information stuff. They give a
Hmm.
brief insert to it, or insert the insight of this, where 1 or 10 gives you a 1 multiplier of a normal healthy teenage human.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
he's deficient in a couple stats. Blah blah blah. Tune in next time. Um, yeah, so we've done our second ritual. We've essentially stomped the quest for organizing the first layer of the, or layer? Yeah, first floor. There we go. That's the word. First
yeah.
floor of the library. No one has ever completed it. Completed it. Great. We go off. We do the queen bit, become a noble guild.
Hmm.
Um, then that's where he improves becomes a level 2 scholar, and he's like, hey, how'd that happen? But secrets are no fun unless you tell everyone. Doesn't happen. Boris is in the dark, lies. Then he gets his next thing, which is bring a book to, or no, I guess that was
I
in between there.
I enjoy that scene very much, because again, there's like so many little things. Like, yeah, we read to escape. Yeah, we read to go to other worlds. But then every now and then, like, there's little nuggets where you bring back, and the whole dynamic with like the Mages College trying to keep all this knowledge and everything secret, and then we got Boris, who, we learned to love, even though he can be a bit snarky at times, and originally just wanted to call the guard of the captain so he could have Joe thrown in jail, and gives him a glowing recommendation. But he's like, fine, keep your secrets, and he goes on a little rant about how we have to
Oh,
discover
I didn't.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to discover everything twice because um, we can't share information and whatnot. And um, yeah, yeah, power of knowledge. Um, Fun fact before I forget, I watched an interview with Dakota Krout over on, I think it's like Lit RPG podcast. I want to say, but the main character Joe is named after a friend of his who passed away. Um, So I wonder how much of his Joe's personality is kind of like mirrored off of his buddy, and I wonder if he was actually oops in the military as well. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to take you off your role
You
there.
were also supposed to mention how roll, bum bum bum, how Dakota also actually rolls his engagements, much like if you have any span of knowledge on D&D. So you have your stats, which allow you to roll a certain dice
Hmm.
based off of what you roll versus their stats. And so in that interview, I didn't see, but we mentioned prior, he says that he actually rolls the engagements, which is very insightful and
Yes, yes.
life hack. Just saying. I might
You,
start. Well, it's a forward backwards thing because.
you should take your dice into work sometime, and when like the boss asks you to do something, just roll. And if they, get below a 5 or something, it's like, oh, sorry, critical failure. I guess I didn't hear you. And just like
Oh,
walk off.
sorry. Yeah. That's fine. But then you roll that triple one or whatnot, and you just gotta smack him across the face.
No, that's if you roll a 20.
No, that's critical. Oh, yeah, I guess that would be critical success for you. But I guess if you were the
Uh,
DM and rolling both engagements, I was thinking, yeah,
okay,
they
okay.
got a critical fail on asking you. But anyway, back to the Ritualist. So many Easter eggs from the Divine Dungeon. I absolutely
Hmm.
love and adore it. But if that's not your flavor, if you didn't want to go back, great standalone.
Yes.
Yet again, Dakota does an amazing job of explaining it to a non-gamer. Like,
Hmm.
he starts off and he's a army paramedic, and so real world normal experience.
Hmm.
Who the guy likes books. real world normal experience. Through the Dungeon Eternium side of things, he ends up getting a spell called Cleanse coupled with his channeling ability and is able to make people well hydrated. That was the whole scene at the beginning where he's, drinking with his squad or whatever, and he's like, the army's motto should be drink water because they're, the quick reaction force and they're going to be wearing like full kit in 110 weather.
Right.
But now, due to real world meeting not real, but real soul space world.
What is real?
Yeah, that's very true.
Real
It,
for
it it all
Joe.
relates, and then
Yeah.
same thing. He enjoys books, and as we learn in the death door, or after you have died, and he's making calls to his mother. Um, Knowledge gained there can apply to the game, and you can get skill points and skill percentage based off of knowledge accrued in there, which it's, Cal got connected to the interwebs and has knowledge of everything.
Right.
So, yeah, he knows. Um,
Yeah.
and then the,
I
the spot for me that I thought most people wouldn't like, but that really stuck out was after we've gone and talked to Uncle Totem or whatever and spouted the conspiracy theories against the Mages Guild with Boris, and we're pretty much told to go elsewhere, and we go to the altar. No. Church? No.
oh yeah. Basically, they have like shrines for all the gods, right? It's like a collection of shrines and everything. Um, which yeah, I really enjoyed that interaction with him as well. When he finally interacts with Uncle Tatum, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Christian. I really don't want to think of you as a god." And he goes through the whole bit. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's totally fine. Just we'll
I'm
switch."
not God. I'm a god in the game of
Hmm.
Eternium,
Hmm.
but let's just switch the name altogether.
Yeah, yeah. Call me Uncle Totem, and then
It's like
instead of
Latin for
praying,
hidden.
yeah, instead of praying, it's just like a query. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Think of
yeah.
me as a search engine.
Hmm. Hmm. Which kind of makes you wonder um, how those gods got all that information, right? If he was in the game in the soul space. Um, Granted, Cal got hooked up to everything, but the fact that
Well, it seems very much like the role factor and or in my mind, all of the gods have to it's a currency. They get power from their followers who are doing acts for them, first filter. Second filter is the gods transact with the ultra super altruistic lexicon bloody bloody blah Cal, and based off of their currency, that's where they can, get knowledge, reward their followers more, yada yada yada. And then due to Uncle Totem not having any, that's where we get to see the chains, hold
mm,
him back
right.
because he hasn't earned enough favor to inquire and or infer enough. Yeah, filter, layer, filter, second apocalypse.
Point
Yeah.
is, questions can only be answered if you ask them. So make sure you ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
There with Joe while interacting with Uncle Totem. Um, this book, like, I really enjoy it. Where like a lot of lit RPGs, it's just like action packed, one thing after another, grind. But you think about it, we go all around this town, everything from the barracks to the guard post, to the different shops, out questing, doing all this fun stuff, and yeah, like you get some of the slice of life, but it really didn't drag for me anywhere. How about with you? Like I always felt like even though we're sitting here as he's in a library,
Well,
it was
and
interesting and kept me engaged.
yeah, and a lot of it was just connecting the dots from the other world because at my very first read through before I was like fully paying attention, and they're like, oh, he can now tweak his rituals, and he's changing his rituals, and ritual montage and blah blah blah. I was like, lame. I don't care about your drawing skill and this mean AI, poking at you. But after I connected all the dots, I was like, oh yeah, that whole book 5 incident with Tom being, 60 and the Northmen or the people doing all this stuff. Like, I was very intrigued because that was one of those things that Dakota didn't really explain. And I was like, tell me more. And it was like, oh, nope, the world's ending. Sorry. And then now we're at the point of we're going through the rituals and we're redefining it. And it's
Yes.
it's like an extra layer that is being, taken into account after the first apocalypse. So it intrigued me a lot more. I felt like it was nice and he really does well with the whole dissecting the Mages College, and yeah, it all plays out smoothly. It it does really well with its pivots because it's like, oh, with the whole time before he goes to pray at the altar or shrine or whatever.
Hmm.
It was just, like, oh, hey, I've got a free day. Monday in the real world. Okay, yeah, blah, 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 blah. I'm going off to see Boris. Just kidding. I'm going to spew this conspiracy theory vitriol, and he's going to tell me to go beepity beep myself in this other direction. And, oh, hey, you're here. Well, since you're here, and all this other knowledge, like, it
Right.
transitioned pretty well for me. And at first, some of the stuff wasn't super intriguing, but
Hmm.
then in the space and knowing the other worlds, I was very intrigued.
Yes.
And yeah, yeah, the books get better. This is another one that like it's fairly short for all these books.
Hmm.
I literally like yeah, listened to it so many times this week.
I was about to say, compared to was last week when we did Stormlight one,
Yeah, because it
uh,
was the end and this is the beginning.
yeah, where takes a couple days. This is an afternoon listen slash read for us, and yeah, creating a new character is always hard when playing a game. I always have challenges doing the character design. I have a couple names that I go back to, but I think like a game like this would really be a challenge for me. Be curious to hear kind of like any
Yeah.
of your struggles on the character creation. Like so many times, I'm just like, I just want to hit random, come up with a name. Oh, they're all taken. All they're all taken. Um,
My
the
problem
fact,
is like I'm very literal with my names. For
yeah.
example, I played Wildstar, and as a medic, you have a AoE heal,
Mhm.
and due to the dotting style of the game where you can stack and stand on top of each other, it's essentially called a trash mob. So I just called him Trash Heals because I heal the mobs or the trash as they're all dotting.
Oh,
And so like it was very like I do this, I heal,
so
or dot for donuts where I played a warlock and I just used my dots damage over time to play my game, and four
yeah.
donuts was just that was like as spicy as I get. Um,
So you're like right in line with the guild leader then for
for A10, yeah.
yeah,
When
yeah.
everybody sees him, they see A10, so it might as well be official. Yeah, and
Yes. Yes. Uh I didn't really register it until I think it was what was her name? Tonya?
or Tiana.
Tiona, like after she explained it, I'm like, "Oh,
Or
wow."
well, that's the first time we hear it because we go
Mm,
through and we just know him as the GM, the guild master.
mm,
But then you know, Joe's talking to Tiona and like, oh hey, I've got some information. Did we get a spot to set up after our place was burned down? And she's like, well, why don't you use his name? And he's like, oh, what's his name? So yeah, that was the very first like, oh, his name is Aiton.
Yeah. Yeah. A10.
Or we call that branding. Yeah. My current gamer tag esque of choice is broken, just because I love messing with people and everyone's like, oh no, something broken, that's horrible. But in my mind, it's all about perspective, because if you break a bone, like, yeah, that's a traumatic event, but it grows back stronger to reinforce it and to make sure it doesn't happen again. When you
Yes.
break an egg, you don't cry over it, you make an omelet, you know, you make scrambled eggs. Like, it's a fact of life. And so breaking things down, recycling, you know, like, that's a way that you reduce, reuse, recycle. So bringing it all together, yeah.
Peter's life lessons slash ramble for the stream. Just because it's broken doesn't mean that it's
It's not always a bad thing. Change your, or what's that? You call it the coffee meme. The guy, it's he's sitting. It's a college campus. The guy's sitting at a pop-up table, and it
oh
says
yeah,
something "change your mind" at the bottom.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, the coffee meme. I just coffee
Yeah.
memed it.
Yeah, just coffee memed it. Um I really enjoy Joe's interaction with Cell.
Yeah, yeah.
And all the puns there. Um but he finally gets a warehouse to do his rituals. He comes up with this ritual that basically progressively, the closer people get into the center of the ritual, the more like sick they get, right? Pretty much the equivalent of food poisoning. You start off at the outer edge, you kind of get like upset stomach. You get closer to the center, you're going to need a change of clothes because like it's coming out of every orifice, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we start to see the issues with the mages college early on, um, but just like Joe and Cell's interaction, the back and forth is just so interesting. Like constantly, Cell is just like full cult um, like mentality where we're following, my college, I'm here, you're a rebel, you're not following the rules. And Joe's like, hey, come up with a better argument. Don't just get upset and yell. Like here he is, Joe's pointing holes in his argument, and Cell's just like diehard cultist. No, this is the way. This is the way.
Do you know the way? Yeah. Little Knuckles meme from or VR chat.
Oh, okay, okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that was a good one, and we get a lot more puns through that because his name is Cell,
mhm.
and you know, much like DBZ Cell, he keeps coming back. And
uh,
I guess that's future for episode 2 or book 2, but and then the puns with, you know, he's essentially being used as a power cell, and he's like, oh, you know, you make a good power cell, and he's like, what? And he says power cell, and he's like, stop using my name. And he just like doesn't get it because he's NPC slash soul warrior, whatever, in this other spot, and yeah, doesn't understand the electricity.
right.
Yeah, and that whole thing, I wanted to know what was really up with the, oh, what was it? Moist ointment in rural pulp scene. Because I thought it
Oh,
was like an activation of one of his rituals, but I don't think it really was. I think he was really just messing with the guys, because then when they throw down, it has nothing to do with it. And he's like, oh, I just didn't want to be the only one awkward, you know,
uncomfortable or whatever.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's like, "Well, you succeeded, you
You
weirdo."
weirdo. Yep.
That's a quote. Next time somebody's just making the situation awkward, just like repeat that phrase, and they'll be just like, "Wait, what? What?"
Yep.
be like, oh, sorry, just quoting one of my favorite books. I'll just be like, what? What? What do you
What else
read?
is in this book? Yeah.
Guys
You'll
with
never know.
necromancy fetishes and killer bunnies, zombie bunnies, and yeah, yeah. There's plenty that if you stopped and tried to explain to somebody, what is it? What are you reading? It's like, uh,
Yeah, you have to be so many layers deep before it makes sense.
yes, yes. Um, yeah. So we bounced all over the place. Want to make sure we do this book justice. Um, really looking forward to continuing the series. The big climax for us in book one is when Cell and Joe get dragged into the Mages College to sign the Accord, right? And through Cell, um, and when Cell's master comes to get him, we pretty much learned that it's a binding contract, right? Like part of their graduation, whenever they get through this milestone as a mage, they have to sign the accord. And the Mages College is
For the second time. Just to get in, you have to sign it.
oh,
And
that's
then they
right.
were going in for a double signing, which after the second signing, more or less, it's when he gets his robe repaired, the
Mm-hmm.
odds and ends lady says they're alive, like, oh, magically powerful artifacts are
Mm-hmm.
alive, even if
Mm-hmm.
only slightly. Well, the accords have been in effect for close to 200 plus years, so they've got a little more of an ego.
Right.
And anytime it takes the power that we get to see the mana engine that they use, it takes that power and it influences anyone who has signed the accord. And yeah, each time you sign it, you get put into a different tier that it's
Mm-hmm.
got more of a influence over you.
Right. Right. Slowly getting bound. Um, and the mages pretty much they have like a lot of really weird rules that end up hurting the human kingdom, right? They're not really helping much with the war effort. If they do, they get heavily taxed to support the mages college. They charge people outrageous amount of money. I'm trying to think of what the scale was. Was it like 100 gold, or was it one
It
gold to a
was
hundred
like,
dollars, or something like
oh,
that? Or was it like a 10 to 1
it,
ratio?
she put in a mill and it ended up at 100,000. So it was a 10 to
Okay,
1.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So pretty much just to like learn two skills or get in, it's like $10,000, which I guess is like typical
Or
college
I thought it
tuition.
was. Uh,
Wasn't it like 1,000 gold?
oh,
So it'd be
okay,
ten
yeah,
thousand dollars just to learn a couple spells and be admitted into the mages college.
yeah. Or yeah,
Um,
they broke the rule of monopolies because essentially it says, hey, you can't have the monopoly on a market. You can do it for a little while, then you lose your patent. Then other people can make it based off of your patent. Blah blah blah. No monopolies, but they held a monopoly over
magic and
magic.
not helping the kingdom.
Yeah, which later we find out after we have destroyed the Accord due to reading the terms and service and procking our one time use um,
Yes.
title, which opens up a lot of stuff that the Arc Cleric or Arc Mage
Mm-hmm.
essentially deferred all the defensive magic of the Mages College to the Accords to bind everyone who has signed them.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, leaving the college defenseless, not letting people leave his side. That way they could defend him because, as we find out, he's let himself go. He's, yeah, not physically active. He's not utilized his abilities. He's pretty much a dictator who, trips and falls and face plants at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was a fun little interaction there, for sure. Um, yeah. What What was one of your favorite moments from the book? Like just laugh out loud moments, looking back. Tough. I know. I know.
You know, it depends on which read I was going through, because there were a couple when, so they finally get their tank. Chad? No, Chad's the archer. They finally get their tank, his bulwark armor,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just taunting the wolfmen, and he's like,
Yes.
someone should call this wolf's older brother. It looks like his sister took his armor and is playing dress up. And it's just like, what? Like, real world taunts actually work as long as you have the correct stats. I was just like, that was a good moment. The the whole uh, altruistic lexicon thing where he gets the level up on his rituals after creating the ritual of containment, which makes them vomit and or poop. And it's like, oh, you're just like King Midas, except for everything you touch doesn't turn into gold, it turns into turds. I'm just like, I got a big chuckle out of that one. Oh man, the power cell one was pretty good. You
Yes.
know, you
So
make a
many good
good power
puns.
cell. What? And he's just like so baffled by everything.
Yes.
It will make more sense after book 2, possibly 4. But when he starts calling the captain of the guard Cappy,
Yeah.
it'll make more
Yeah.
sense later. But that's a good one to look back on and be like, there's a lot of times that we interact with these NPCs or other soul people, and it pretty much lays it all out, because the odds and ends place is like, oh, well, this should have been a going out of business thing. Hey, here's a quest line. How about you find me someone else? Bum, bum, bum. And then,
Foreshadowing?
in line with, calling the captain of the guard Cappy, and yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of great moments. Great.
One of my favorite feel good moments that happened right before the one you talked about with the tank there was um, well, bit of backstory. We learned that the dive capsules and the some of the other gear that people use that aren't quite as advanced actually adjusts people's brain chemistry, right? Part of the reason why the dive capsules were on back orders was they were putting like all these sick people and people with like PTSD who have like brain chemistry imbalance like into the pods, and it's been kind of like correcting them, quote unquote. And we learned that one of the side effects, the reason why people like as immersive as this game is, and they're fighting and they're literally getting attacked and killed, that the game is kind of like adjusting it. It's not really numbing the pain,
Or it
but
took some of it away, I think
it
it
took
said.
it took some of it away, but you still feel pain, right? Especially if
Or
you're
yeah,
in the
yeah,
dive capsule.
the after effects of living through the trauma kind of
But
deal.
it takes it away afterwards. And after our tank dies, I'm going to look up his name, so I stop calling him Tank. He comes back and he's just
Chad's the archer. Guess is the rogue. Tiona is the combat fanatic slash
Dylan.
Dylan.
Dylan's the team tank. So they get this really good armor. Joe goes and he goes to this weaponsmith and says, "Hey, can you craft this for me?" After he gets insulted a couple more times, saying, "No, go away. I don't sell mage armor. Are you a ghoul?" Et cetera, et cetera. And then he's like, "No, like this isn't for me." He's like, "Oh, okay, I'll take your money then." Um, But yeah, after Dylan comes back and they go to get him sized, like he was just struggling. He's like, I don't know if I could be a tank. I don't know if I can do this. And then Joe foots the bill to help get him this epic armor before they go out, and he starts, um, calling Wolfmen little girls and everything. Like you just going from that low to the high of having a full set of armor, and it's just descriptive enough that you can see him like with his two big tower shields with spikes, bashing people around and everything.
And honestly, like that's the feel of why I love video games and lit RPG. Like the sense of
Yeah,
progression and the feel good of gearing up and decking out and just, competing at that next level and the struggle and then, being able to overcome it. You don't get a whole lot of that IRL because when you progress, it's not a sense of accomplishment. It's just an extra, nail in your coffin or soul crushing empire that's trying to topple
I don't
what you're
know,
trying to
Pete.
achieve.
These geek out sessions leave me with a sense of feel good and sense of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
accomplishment,
yeah.
and sharing these Sunday evenings slash nights with all of our lovely bookish book dragon friends who come to geek out with us. You know,
Yeah, this is the closest I enjoy to get to real life,
Kaladin
but
salute or Bridge 4 salute, or no, is that the salute? Bridge 4,
I don't remember. I know it's an X.
Wakanda forever. Um, yeah,
I guess I was talking about other external values.
fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah. This definitely brings the feel goods, and
Enough said.
there are so many times I want to talk to people about things, and I'm like, oh yeah, and then I end up like giving all the backstory, and they're still lost, and I'm like, we can't be friends. I can't. Like nothing I say makes any sense to you.
That's okay.
Something happens and everyone's all defeated, and I'm like, this isn't even my final form, and they're like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I was like, try again. They're like, okay, and I was like, but that's not as epic. That just doesn't bring the feels.
Hence why we have this nice little corner of the internet where even if they don't get it, they won't judge you as hard. So
But that's how you know you're winning when you get all those trolls. But that's just a fact of the memes. Like I don't mind as much.
this is true. This is true. Um, yeah, I think we got most of the highlights there of the Ritualist Book 1. Really looking forward to getting current with the series and doing some more theory crafting and getting into the lore of this epic world. Um, Final thoughts, Pete?
Read it if you haven't. It's short. You have time to catch up for 2, which will be possibly taking place sometime next month. Since this is the first one of the month, you have approximately a month to read 2 books.
Or more. They're pretty quick. They're fun. They're great laughs. If you are a Kindle Unlimited member, the whole series, I believe, is available with that subscription. Go check it out. While Peter is queuing up the slide for next week's book, if you haven't already, please share this stream/channel with a geek in your life. We're always looking for new books to geek out on. If you haven't already, please hit the like button to help with the YouTube algorithm. We're hanging out all the time, 24/7 on Discord. So that's when we're offline, where we take the geek out and keep it going. Geek Out 34 next week, currently scheduled for 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll let you know if that changes. We are doing our first dive into the realm of Star Wars. Star Wars The Old Republic, Fatal Alliance by Sean Williams. This takes place 3,500 years before Darth Vader. And one of the things I enjoy about this series, it's been a while since I've read it, but you get a lot more of the Sith Lords in it. Um, and I know for myself personally, as I've gotten older and gone back to look at the Star Wars series, I see it in a new light than when I did when I was younger. A lot of fun, really excited to get Peter to give this book series a shot. Um, Highly recommend it. Hope you guys pick it up and geek out with us next week. Thanks everybody for joining us during this live stream. And yeah, hope to geek out with you guys here soon.
Bye.
Bye.